Hello, this is Rocky Marciano. When I was heavyweight champion of the world, they called me the Brockton Blockbuster. You find out why.
Welcome to the Rocky Marciano Archives, a channel dedicated to the life and career of the immortal champion. In this latest upload, we take a brief look at the history of Al Weill, the man who would take Marciano to the heavyweight championship of the world. We hope you get something out of this. Born December 28, 1893, in Reviled, Alsace-Lorraine, France, Armand-Étienne Alphonse Weill, known more commonly simply as Al, first set foot in America at the age of 13 when he sailed steerage with his horse dealer father, Nathan Weill, because the old man didn't have any sugar, as Weill would later recall, to Yorkville, New York in 1907 to stay with his paternal grandmother. Within 2 short decades, he would become one of the preeminent managers and promoters in America. His rise to this position was one of small steps, beginning at the age of 20 whilst working as a barker and running the high strike at the Golden City Amusement Park in Canarsie on Brooklyn's now famous waterfront, with stops overseas as a shipping clerk, salesman, hosiery haulage assistant, and some time prize-winning ballroom dancer where, along with his occasional dance partner and future film star George Raft, he would hotfoot the Texas Tommy in his $2 rented tux. In 1914, the 20-year-old Al Weill was sharing rooms with a young, promising flyweight boxer, Andy or Anthony, Tony Brown. Brown was managed by one of the most colorful of New York fight characters, one John the Barber Reisler. Brown introduced the two, after Weill had ingratiated himself into the fighter's corner by carrying his bag. It was to be the start of a journey that would produce someone remarkable. Reisler, an Austrian immigrant, obtained his unusual moniker of the Barber not because he was a villainous brute, a hoodlum, a killer, although he did witness the murder of notorious gambler Herman Rosenthal outside of the Hotel Metropole on Broadway in 1912, but simply because this was his main profession before becoming a manager of fighters in the second decade of the 20th century. His biggest claim to fame was his management of a promising young heavyweight named Jack Dempsey, but he lost Dempsey to the bigger fish, Jack Doc Kearns, who took the lean, hungry fighter all the way to the World Heavyweight Championship and $1 million gates. Weill himself would recall being with Kearns at the second Dempsey-Tunney fight on the night of the infamous Battle of the Long Count in Chicago, September 1927, when the gate grossed $2.5 million and Kearns turned to him and said, "Look at 'em, coming to the park in droves. Never seen anything like it, Al." What Reisler saw in Weill is pure conjecture now, for up until his friendship with Brown, Weill had shown little interest in boxing. Perhaps it was his bombast as a talker and hawker at the amusement park. One thing was for sure, the young man who would go on to become known as the Vest, because he got all the gravy, certainly knew how to draw the crowds. And as the saying goes, where there's crowds, there's money. Whatever it was, however, Reisler gave Weill a job as assistant second to his fighters, including Tony Brown, whom he took full managerial control over after boxing was decriminalized in New York. He kept control of Brown until the boxer left to represent his country in the First Great War and faded from history. For Al Weill, however, there was no looking back. He soon found himself a real prospect in the form of bantamweight Sammy Nabel, an outstanding amateur, but he was hard to match due to his being a troublesome, spoiling fighter who clinched hard and often, coining the phrase, "Hold 'em Sammy." Yet there was no more dancing for prize money, no more selling trophies, one hot-shoeing it across the state, no more inviting punters to ring a bell for pennies or a cigar. Weill was on his way in the murky, often crooked world of the prize fight game, and it fit his character better than any tailored vest ever would. A small hint at his almost meteoric rise was suggested by Boston promoter Manny Almeida, who would soon, along with Sam Silverman, become pivotal in Weill's plan for this Marciano kid. How do you think he got where he did? Almeida mused to a reporter after Al Weill's death in 1969. He got there by greasing the right poles. There is little doubt that this is a thinly veiled reference to the underworld elements who controlled boxing during the prohibition days of the young Weill's ascendancy, and who would tighten their miasmic grip once the law had been lifted and new outlets for power were needed. For boxing, with its element of outsiders both in and out of the ring, was a perfect breeding ground for corruption. Everyone wanted to be a champion when that title, regardless of division, still held an almost mythic quality, and people were prepared to pay to achieve even the smallest piece of it. So for Al to bed down with those who controlled the sport was no disgrace. As Almeida added to his own statement, then everyone was in their pockets. If they weren't then, they never got anywhere. The man who would emerge as undisputed underworld czar of the sport, and for whom, it is alleged, Weill himself served as a kind of shadow manager, was the notorious Frankie Carbo, known by the sobriquet of Mr. Fury or Mr. Gray, who had in his own past been a former mafia hitman for the legendary firm of Murder, Inc. Carbo's ascension to the pinnacle of boxing, albeit in the shadows, was forged through his association with the almost naive James Norris, owner of the International Sporting Club, the official face of boxing in the late 1940s. Indeed, there was not a major bout made, nor champion crowned, without the sanction of Carbo. His was a reign that would not be challenged until the Kefauver hearings some 3 decades later. By the late 1920s, Weill was arranging matches at the soon-to-be-defunct Harlem Olympic Arena in New York. He would go on from there to promote at the famed Ebbets Field in Brooklyn, then on to the Boston Gardens. Here, his association with both Almeida and Silverman was forged, before, in 1931, being invited to promote solely for Mike Jacobs' 20th Century Sporting Club, which was the zenith of professional boxing for over a decade. Nevertheless, it would not be until 1936 that this, by now top-tier and widely disparaged promoter, found his first world champion. That Al Weill was not the mostly highly thought-of personality in boxing by both the American press and his competitors is no secret. Few, if any, in the game had a friendly word to say about him. Legendary trainer Angelo Dundee called him the rudest man I ever met. Referred to as Hitler, Mussolini, and Stalin rolled into one by one acerbic journalist. It was not through sheer spite, or even a form of envy, that elicited such chagrin from the sports scribes who fell foul of his inability to suffer fools. It was more the perceived personality of the man himself, for he was seen as not just rude, but egotistical, bombastic, overbearing, with a slave-master mentality over those he controlled, as Rocky would later state to British journalist Norman Giller. I couldn't even wipe my own ass without his say-so. Yet despite this reputation, all were in accord that despite his alleged shortcomings as a person, as a manager of fighters, he was virtually second to none. Angelo Dundee again, even his many enemies, could not pick holes in his management. He got the job done. This was attested by his first world champion, who came in the form of lightweight Lou Ambers, whose career Weill himself bankrolled, leading Al and his family into almost financial disaster and sending him gray into the bargain. Eventually, he would take 2 more fighters to world honors in Joey Archibald at feather and Marty Servo at welter. Yet despite these successes, what he really craved was that cash cow which was wrapped up in the heavyweight championship. He had smelled it with Johnny Risco in the late 20s and early 30s, touched it with Arturo Godoy in the 40s, but he had yet to hold it. There is little doubt that as the plump, heavy-rimmed, spectacled, cigar-chomping Weill sat in his office situated amidst the neon decadence and fakery of Broadway, thoughts of having at last found his champion were farthest from his calculating mind. Yet he was moved enough by his recollection of Marciano from the prospective professional's New York appearance in March, plus the letters he had received from both Boland and Colombo, to give the latter a bang, as he would refer to conversations on the phone. as Marciano related to Al Hirschberg and Milton Gross of the Saturday Evening Post of September 1956. We were playing a ball game for the Ward 2 Memorial Club at Edgar's Playground when Allie's sister came running out of the house yelling, "Hey, Allie, there's a long-distance call for you. Somebody named Al Weill." So Allie, who was the catcher that day, ran all the way home with his shin guards and chest protector still on, and we held up the ball game. When he came back, he acted like nothing unusual happened. He put his mask back on, and we started the game again. When the innings was over, he says to me on the bench, "That was Weill calling from Washington. He wants to see us first chance we get to go into New York. When you want to go, Rock?" Thank you for listening. Next time we take a brief look at the remarkable Charlie Goldman. Until then, we will see you down the road.
If you like this content, then hit the subscribe button. To really support this channel, consider joining for just over $1 a month and unlock ad-free members-only content. Every member will play a key part in revealing the real Rocky.
I just enjoyed combat. I just enjoyed the sport that I had learned so well, and I had practiced so much that when the bell rang, I did a job. I could concentrate on the opponent.
It was a great, great career for me. I'm proud and very happy to talk about it. Sometimes I wonder why I was such an aggressive man in the ring.